Hello, this video is about using two different types of models, temperature cubes and a number line, to show diagrams or models of addition and subtraction of positive and negative numbers, or integers, whole numbers in this case. The first problem that we have is 5 plus negative 2. And that means, in the context of temperature cubes, add 5 hot cubes, then add 2 cold cubes. And you can see that we start with adding 5. Even though there's not an addition sign in the front, you can imagine that by adding 5 hot cubes, it brings the temperature up 5. So here is a picture of what that looks like. Here are the 5 hot cubes that were added, and then here are the 2 cold cubes that are added. And we can see from this picture that here is a pair of 1 positive and 1 negative, which makes a 0 pair. So 1 positive and 1 negative is a 0 pair, and that happens again. This hot cube and this cold cube make a total change in temperature to be 0, and it happens again here. And what's left? These 3 hot cubes. So the sum of 5 and negative 2 is positive 3. Now let's see what that looks like on the number line. On the number line, we can start at 0 and add the 5 hot, which brings the temperature up. So the arrow goes to the right. It's very important that you draw and recognize what the arrow means in the context of the situation. So temperature increases 5, but then when we add 2 cold, it's going to bring the temperature down, so the arrow will go to the left now. So here, we've added 2 cold, and the arrow goes to the left, and the result is 3. Let's try another one. This time, we have negative 5 plus negative 2. Think for a moment. What situation in temperature cubes does this describe? This situation can be interpreted as add 5 cold cubes, then add 2 cold cubes. Here's what it looks like using a temperature cube diagram. First, I add the 5 cold cubes, and then I add the 2 cold cubes. Now there's no 0 pairs that create 0 temperature change, so we can simply count how much cold we have, and that's 7 cold, which makes negative 7. And so the sum is negative 7. What does that look like on the number line? Here's a number line. We start at 0. And since we're adding 5 cold, cold brings the temperature down to negative 5. And then we add another 2 cold, which brings the temperature further down, or more cold, to negative 7. And we can see how this diagram is represented on the number line. Okay, let's try another one. This one says negative 5 minus negative 2. Take a moment and think, what does that mean about temperature cubes? How would you interpret that? So this situation, -5 minus -2, tells us to add 5 cold cubes and then remove or take away 2 cold cubes. The subtraction tells us to remove or take away, and that is really important to understand. So let's draw a diagram of what that means using temperature cubes. So here we've started with adding the 5 cold cubes, but then since it's removing or subtraction, we're going to take away 2 of them, and we can do that by crossing them out. So we've taken 2 away. How many are left? 3 cold. So that means that the answer or difference to this problem is going to be -3. And you can see that there's 3 cold left after you take those 2 cold away. Okay, let's consider another problem that's a little bit more sophisticated. But before we do that, let's take a look at what this problem means on the number line. So the first instruction tells us we're going to add 5 cold cubes, which we've done here. And since it's cold, the temperature is going down or to the left on the number line. So we can show that using an arrow pointing to the left. Now, since we're going to remove 2 cold, we're going to go to the right on the number line. So we indicate that with an arrow pointing to the right. And you can see that I've shown that I've taken away 2 cold. And when you take away cold, the temperature increases, which makes sense. It goes to the right, and you end up at -3. Okay, now let's consider another problem. Here we have 5 minus -2. Think for a moment. How do you interpret that using the cubes? Think of this problem as adding 5 hot cubes to start off with, and then removing 2 cold cubes. The subtraction symbol here means we're going to remove or take away 2 cold. So let's start by adding 5 hot. Okay, we've got our 5 hot. But here is what makes this problem a little bit more complicated. If we have to take away 2 cold, there's no cold to take away. How do we get some cold in this diagram to take away? We use 0 pairs. So what we've done here is we've created 1, 2 0 pairs. Since each of these means 0 degrees in temperature, really the temperature of the pot that we're throwing our temperature cubes into now is still 5, because these 2 are at 0. But now we have some negative or cold cubes to take away. So I can do that. I can take these away. And I've subtracted 2 cold. I've removed 2 cold. What am I left with? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that makes sense, because if I have 5 and I take away some cold, the temperature is going to go up. The temperature goes from 5 hot to 7 hot. You may notice that this shows how subtracting a negative is the same thing as adding positive. 5 minus -2 is the same thing as 5 plus 2. Actually, let me correct that. Subtracting a negative has the same result as adding a positive. When you're subtracting, you have to show, or show understanding, that you're taking something away. Okay, I'll do this on a number line as our last example. We start by adding 5, as the directions tell us. And then since we're going to take away 2, we know that we're going to take away 2 cold. And we know that taking away cold is the same thing as increasing the temperature. So on the number line, we will go up to 7. And we get the same result. Okay? Again, it's really important that you understand that when you have a subtraction problem and you understand that it's removing something, and then that shows in the diagram. Or if you're using a number line, that you use some words to explain why the arrow moves to the right when you subtract. In this case, it's moving to the right because we're taking away cold, so we understand that it will get hotter, or the temperature will increase. Okay, that wraps up that video on understanding addition and subtraction with integers using a temperature cube diagram and a number line.